Hello, everyone, and welcome to Rising Stars. Jessica Suffa here. I'm usually the co-host with Mick Tomey, but today I'll be hosting the conversation, and I'm joined by Phil Collins from the Prescaney Hyperlift team, who's co-hosting with me today. So Phil and I have worked together for years. We led stars together in a health plan. We partnered together when I ran my own consultancy. And now he and I are colleagues at Prescaney within the Star Center of Excellence. So excited to be with him today. He's a stars expert, a true data mind, and I'm really excited to have him co-host. We've also got an amazing guest on today, Latanya Augustine with CleverCare. CleverCare is one of the higher performers nationally in the HEDIS space. She'll keep our conversation going from Phil. With Phil, we're just going to start out with a quick conversation around HEDIS medical record review, what plans should be, where plans should be focusing now, what they should be doing for a best strategy from a STARS perspective, and then we'll keep that conversation going with Latanya. So with that said, Phil, for the few folks out there in MA land who don't know who you are, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
There's probably a little bit more than a few, but yeah, definitely excited to be on hosting. Now Mick is officially going to have to say when I was the host of Rising Stars, because I fully expect you to take it over. I am the Client Success Director here at Hyperlift/PG, mainly pretty much over Stars Monitor, which is our predictive platform. Love all things Stars, really have a strong HEDIS background. And, we are going to start today off with a medical record. It's January, nearly February. People are getting ready to pull their HEDIS samples for the few remaining HEDIS hybrid measures. That is a chance. This is one of the last few levers that people can pull from a STARS perspective, star rating perspective. We've got CAHPS coming up, but really HEDIS is something that you can quote unquote control from a medical record standpoint. And for STARS 2026, just to give you guys kind of a shocking data point that I saw this morning, 90 health plans missed the next cut point for GSD by 1%. So CBP was around 62. So there were a lot more health plans that missed GSD by 1%. But I think that speaks to, really having a strategy and a plan going into medical record season. Triple weighted measures, 2 triple weighted measures are in that HEDIS bucket that health plans can essentially still impact. And love that we have our guest on today from CleverCare, Latanya. Her and I, we have been working together for a few years now, and it's perfect having her on, because when you talk about GSD and blood pressure performance, they achieved 5 stars in both last year. Would love to get your opinion, Latanya, on how do you guys approach the medical record season? How have you guys been successful over the last few years? Before you answer that, I guess we'll do a quick intro to Latanya and CleverCare. CleverCare has exploded in growth over the last few years. They've nearly tripled, I think I saw, which has been amazing. And not only have you guys tripled in growth, but you've also increased your star rating as well over the last year. So something Jessica and I were talking before earlier today, that is commendable and amazing that you're able to triple membership and also increase the star rating at the same time. So let you introduce yourself, and then let's dive into the medical record strategy.
Of course. No, and thank you guys for having me today. So I'm Latanya Augustine, the director of the CAHPS and STARS programs here at CleverCare. I've been here, 2 years now, but to your point, we're continuously growing. That growth has been organic. word of mouth. So for our members, the experience, the partnership we have with their providers, we have where our members are referring friends and families. Hey, come join CleverCare. So that's a testament to how we approach managing, the overall healthcare and partnering with our providers. We're looking forward to continuing to grow in the Medicare space as well. But so how we approach, to your question, Phil, how we approach medical record season is definitely maximizing our chart chase. As you mentioned, what can we do now? Understanding that the measurement year has closed, it's looking into the chase logic. So ensuring that we're chasing the correct charts from the correct providers. We know that for HEDIS hybrid, it's a short window where we have an opportunity to improve rates. So ensuring that we're efficient and effective with how we're strategizing and targeting providers is going to be critical. It has been critical for us. And then I'll just say that the improvement that we're seeing in rates year over year, it's always just understanding that the cut points change every year. If everyone's doing a good job, they're doing well, the cut points are going to increase. So I'm always just pushing to do better year over year and not looking at just the numerator denominator, right? Ensuring that our opportunities to maximize compliance to 100%, that's what we do, right? If we know that we have a diabetic and they have an A1C that needs to be controlled, they're on our radar. So working with our providers to ensure that they're getting the test and that A1C is controlled, that's pretty much it's been our focus throughout the year.
I love that. One side's not more important than the other, right? There's so much focus on getting folks under control, blood pressures, blood sugars, and that's challenging, right? That's a big part of the battle. But I come from a world of nursing in the Wayback Machine where the saying was, if you didn't document it, it wasn't done, right? So capturing that data is just as important, and all that hard work is for naught if you don't have an effective data capture strategy at the end of the day. So
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And I share that background. So, yeah, coming from the clinical
Oh,
side, yeah. So, prior to joining managed care, I was a nurse, bedside nurse for about 10 years. So, bringing that over to managed care, I think
wonderful.
that's also where you see kind of the passion, right? And to, if we're
Yeah.
not managing these chronic conditions, the outcomes, right, they're going to be a lot worse. So, how do you get ahead of it?
I love that. I love that about you. That I knew I liked you, Latanya. I think having that background too, I think
Mhm.
it really gives us kind of that unique ability of not seeing a list of gaps, but like a list of people, right?
Yes,
Of human beings,
yes.
and bringing that clinical care aspect and that nursing heart into the work that we do.
Agree, agree. I think it makes a huge difference.
Definitely.
How
Definitely.
are you?
Well,
How are you
kudos on
guys?
your 5 stars in both of those measures. And go ahead, Phil. You got it.
Oh no, I was just gonna say. I mean, what is your guys' strategy for those two measures moving forward as they potentially shift from hybrid
Mhm.
to that admin slash ECDS reporting only? I think we saw in the advanced notice, GSD was listed in there as them running a parallel measure, and I think around 2030 is when it would essentially transition out, depending on what year they decide to bring it in. So how are you guys planning for that, even though it's a handful of years down the road?
So the way we're approaching it is, so for my team, we pretty much manage HEDIS and STARS prospectively as well as retro, right? So during the prospective period, we're working closely with our providers to identify members that are in the measure and walking them through what are the requirements, what are we looking for. We know that administrative data is always going to trump hybrid, right? So our attempt there is to work with the providers, provide their gap list, and work that measure throughout the year and ensure that those administrative rates are trending well. And so when we roll into retrospective hybrid, there's possibly a small amount of charts you're chasing at that time. You're just really pulling the data, assisting with some data capture. If it's a clinical gap, we educate the providers prospectively. And if it's a data gap, we're capturing that information retrospectively. So that's pretty much how we're tackling both measures. And you have that bucket of uncontrolled members, right? They completed the test, but they're non-compliant because they're they're not controlled. So that's where the education comes in. How are we partnering with our providers to
Right.
close the gap, educate the members? Are they receiving disease management, right? Are we including them in case management, care management? So ensuring that for those members that are out of control, we're proactively managing them and their conditions throughout the year.
I love that, Latanya. I think, that's a place that I think a lot of star leaders fall down. And you see that in their rates where they allow all of their stars initiatives to start and end in a calendar year as if members live in a measurement year, right? And they don't. And as a result, you just see those same struggling members like failing year over year and bringing them down. And I see how you got to 5 stars in those measures. I mean, you've just got your arms around everyone.
We try, and it's more so also the approach with the providers, right? So we have a member
Right.
first approach to how we manage our members, but also understanding that your provider has to be your partner. You guys have to work hand in hand with how you're managing the members. You can't work in silos. You have to understand the nuances from the providers. How do we support and guide the providers on the care that needs to be completed and then ultimately reported back to CMS? So it's also about engaging the provider in that care plan.
I love that. I love that. That'll
That's
safeguard you a bit from some of those proposed changes we're seeing in that advance notice on the risk adjustment space as well, right? When you're just driving members to that home care team and
Exactly.
allowing a clinical gap closure to close the gaps for stars and risk. So,
oh yeah. We need I think for this year, Jessica, we need a little clip like you remember the baked beans commercial where it was like roll that beautiful bean footage. We need the roll that beautiful stars like performance or footage. That's what we need for this
right?
year.
Right.
Well, awesome.
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the medical record insights. And yeah, you guys, job well done again on the performance of those two measures. They're super hard. Those cut points, I think a lot of people were shocked with that 5-star cut point for GSD last year, but didn't matter to you guys.
You hit it. Nailed it. With room, with cushion. So well done. Phil was bragging about you before we popped on. So
Oh, that's an honor. That's an
so
honor.
right. So HEDIS is part of that Q1 strategy, right? But with
Yes.
very few measure sets left to really influence for Star Year 2027, I know while preparing for Star Year 28, plans are kind of laser focused on what yet can we still do to ensure we hit our Star 27 goals. I mean, love to hear about all the great work you're doing in the HEDIS space. We've also, in just a couple weeks now, any week now, those TTY and foreign language calls will start rolling in. It looks like you guys did great last year. You got 4-star performance in both, and in measures where 1 or 2 calls can knock you down a star. I mean, you guys held your ground. And we also know that CMS is proposing retirement of these measures, right, for Star Year 28, which could make them the last year. The last year we see them as part of Star strategy. So in that space, what's your plan to go out with a bang?
And that's exactly it. Let's go out with a bang. um, so with TTY, again, yeah, right now, in the space that we're in, the measures that we can impact, TTY, CAHPS, HEDIS hybrid, that's where we're honing in on, and where pretty much our leadership team is focused on proactively managing those measures until the surveys go out.
Mhm.
TTY, we are working closely with our vendors as well. Sometimes we may miss the mark. We did well last year, but again, we're proactively working those measures, test cause, ensuring that we're not only testing internally, but also with our vendors. Because if your vendors are not meeting the SLAs, that can also impact the survey. If you're translating over to a translation service and they're not meeting the mark, so we're actually honing in on oversight of our vendors as well. But to your point, it's really educating the cost center, oversight of our vendors for those TTY translations calls. So making sure that we can maximize those measures, measure performance, and in this year with a bang. That's our goal.
Yeah, I love that. That's the recipe, isn't it? All the stakeholders, and some plans forget the vendor piece of it too, the vendor management, right? And then just that consistent, persistent monitoring, tracking, and correcting in real time.
Right.
Definitely. I don't know, Phil, were you over the call center at all in your past life or?
Luckily, no. The only call center I was doing was calls to hospital systems or something like that, trying to bribe them for medical record charts.
Right?
So yeah, no, glad I did not have to deal with call center.
Every plan I talk to, it's part D for some reason. I don't know why, because accuracy doesn't play it in. Like that's always the measure that goes down first. And it's like the French interpreters every time. I mean, for those French interpreters out there, be on point this year. Get your
Right. Right.
yeah.
and those measures, like those, so much of stars is just taking care of business with those measures that you can control, right?
That's
Like,
right.
CAHPS and HEDIS, they're survey measures, right? Like that call center, you can own that, right? And
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
something to be prepared for. Those are staple, what I call staple measures because
Right.
you can control them. If you can highly perform in those, it puts less stress on everybody come CAHPS and HEDIS, where everybody's, crossing their fingers, hoping CAHPS ends up on their side of the green grass. So
Right.
Agree. Agree. TTY, that's operations. That's something we can control, right? So yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, we had that as a banner in everyone's cubicle in the call center one year. It said, "Don't stress, just say yes." Right. For those of you who work in stars, that's the magic answer. That's the once you've said yes in that language, you've passed the metric. So
that's a
yeah.
great one, and you know what? It's kind of like it's a double-edged sword almost when you look at them getting rid of it,
Hmm.
because plans are high performers, right? To your earlier point, Jessica, you miss one and you're pretty much in 4 star.
Right.
What is nice is that with that measure kind of gone, it increases the weight of the other measures for the Part C and Part DQI. Because if you were a 4, you weren't hitting significant improvement next year because
Hmm.
it most of the time is over 100% and you can't reach it. So, I think there's, while some health plans are worried about it going away in 2028, stars 2028, what is nice is that you can actually go to other measures for significant improvement now instead of just looking at your call centers and saying we can't hit it because we got to go over 100, which is impossible. So I think there's kind of a silver lining to it.
Yeah. For sure. And with CAHPS left, I mean, let's talk about CAHPS. We have the CAHPS survey coming out in March. And Latanya, I think you are a great health plan to talk to about CAHPS because you have this huge growth you've experienced and it's intentional growth, which is so unusual in today's market, right? In today's market, where a lot of health plans have chosen to kind of hunker down and just right side operations financially, you guys are like plowing ahead, intentionally growing, drawing members into your plan that want to be there versus the experience a lot of other health plans have where big players are retracting from markets and members are kind of being almost a forced migration being dumped into the health plan who are unhappy. You have members that chose to join your health plan. They're coming in with a whole different attitude, and because it's been growth over the last couple years, this is one of the first years that a bunch of those newer members are going to receive the CAP survey. So, would love to hear a little bit about what your strategy is there, for your newer folks and for the folks that have been with you for years.
Yeah. Happy to share, but yeah, agree. With the members that are coming into the plan, it's all about how we're welcoming them into the plan, right?
Hmm.
Ensuring that they're aware of benefits. Sometimes you run into negative cap surveys because the members just don't know how to access care, what's available to them, right? So if the members are getting a rundown from the health plan, if you will, on what's available. If you're running into barriers such as accessing care, accessing your benefits, understanding how and when to reach out. With CleverCare, we have a member first mentality, right? So as we're growing and bringing our members in, we take feedback from our surveys, we take feedback from grievances, CTMs, right? So we use member feedback as a continuous loop on how we improve. And I would say some of our growth is just that the members see that if there's an issue, if they need assistance, if they need access, we're here for you. And a lot of our messaging has been that. And I can say that's also what's adding to our member growth. It's pretty much word of mouth. I shared this earlier where members are
Yeah,
actually referring others over because of the experience that they're getting. Ultimately, it will reflect in the CAHPS survey, right?
it will.
And we're seeing that. We're seeing most of this is going to be public. It's public knowledge, right? If you're looking at year over year CAHPS results, you'll see that we're moving forward. So for us, it's been a priority of not only waiting on like the annual surveys. Or mock surveys. If plans don't have a mock survey, you definitely need to have a mock survey because that's when you get the details of what's working versus what's not working. But then
That's
actually
right.
taking action on the feedback. That's something that we do continuously. Um, we use our members' feedback to improve if there's areas that we need to hone in on, if there's providers that may need to partner closer on and coach and educate. We partner closely with our providers on that. So that's how we're approaching CAHPS, and feedback has been pretty favorable.
I love that. Health plans see the potential removal of those operational measures from stars, and they think, oh, we don't need to worry about those anymore. I mean, we'll take the hit. They're probably high performing, but let's focus on XYZ. But there's no winning caps, right? If you don't focus on those are the canaries in the coal mine. I hear you saying it, right? Mining those call center data, mining that appeals and grievance data to work caps throughout the year,
Right.
not just Q1.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I love that.
Right. And I know some with the updates and how things are moving away operational, those are measures you perform well in. So with CMS moving more towards outcomes, sorry, with them moving more towards outcomes and experience, that's something I'm in favor of because it's how well we're managing our members, how well we're partnering with our providers. It's not a check the box that, service happened, check the box, HRA happened, check the box. It's more so how are you managing these chronic conditions? We can believe we're doing a great job with managing our members. Providers can believe they're doing a great job, but does the member perceive it that way? And if they're not, that's when that negative CAP survey comes into play. So for me, moving away from operations, outcomes, and experience being the drivers of stars, I'm all for it.
Latanya's like, bring on the
Yes,
hard measures, right?
right.
I have a plan for that.
That may be my clinical hat, but hey, I think that's definitely how you measure stars performance, right?
That's the truth.
Yep.
Definitely. That's what it's about. And moving towards outcomes, I mean, that just like and surveys, it just brings to mind those Haas outcomes measures, right? Coming back through that Haas survey, they came back in 26. They're moving up to a triple weight in 27. CMS is considering even the addition of a third triple weighted PFADL measure, which would make the Haas component of stars just huge. I think it's been 3% of the ratings for so long that a lot of plants just thought it's hard to move. Like they treated it like osteo, right? For those osteo fans out there, I'm sorry, but they treated it like osteo, where they're like, it's not a lot of weight, it's hard to move. Let's focus here, and that's no longer an option. What has been your approach internally to bring Haas back to the forefront? I think is part of the battle, and then getting buy-in from leadership to invest in an area where it's really hard to demonstrate direct ROI and measure progress.
Yeah, well, getting the investment into those measures, it's not. Well, it's somewhat difficult, but not too difficult because again, it goes into the outcomes. So how we've been approaching HOS is again partnership with the providers. These things are happening. The providers are assessing through annual wellness visits, routine physicals, right? They're assessing if the member's physical health is improving or declining. That's your annual wellness visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about educating the providers on surveys, the importance of ensuring that there's those feedback loops to members, right? Hey, we discussed this in your annual wellness visit. When it comes to fall precautions, et cetera, things like that, they're discussed on a routine basis, but it goes back to member recall, right? So having those touch points with the members, including them in care plans. So we've been honing in on provider education as well as member education. As you're getting these surveys, it's important that you complete the surveys because we want to hear from you. So we're encouraging survey completions, but then also educating our providers that these surveys are live and this is what members are being asked so that the providers can then explain to the members why it's important that we're talking about your physical health, why it's important that we're revisiting your mental health. And if there's any decline, we're building out a care plan to ensure that we're addressing that. So it goes back to, again, partnering with the provider, education, coaching. This is what members are being asked and they're being surveyed on it. So let's ensure that when they get that survey, they can respond accordingly.
Yeah, I love that. I do. A lot of health plans too. I don't know if you guys have, but I'm surprised how many health plans I chat with that don't know that they can request from CMS full cohort identified data for HOS. And those that know they can, they're like, yeah, we've asked for that, but we don't know what the heck to do with it. Like it's sitting on a shelf.
Yep.
Where do you guys live in that space? Have you started to think about that, asking for and using that
Yeah,
data?
yeah, that is on our action plan. We partnered with
Wonderful.
just reviewing the data, reviewing the results, understanding the survey, and incorporating that in our provider education. But actually utilizing the CMS reports, that is something that we need to kind of delve deeper into. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, that full cohort data, like you've got the baseline
Mm-hmm.
and you've got the follow up.
Mm-hmm.
You see, and you know the members who declined, and you've got the claim story
Right.
for in between, right? Just
Right.
taking and going back and putting that all together. What experiences do those members that declined have, and how do I apply that to the current population?
Um,
Kind of extrapolate that across the current population and
agree.
drive some targeted intervention.
Yeah.
Yeah, call me, Latanya. We'll talk about that. How to do.
Definitely. Definitely.
I mean, those are so crucial too, because when you think ahead to STARS 28, you're losing the medication adherence, triple weighted
Yes.
measures, they're getting pulled out of Part DQI. You've got to figure out which measures you can use to, essentially replace those points. And, those two improving and maintaining mental and physical health measures, 2028 is, the year that you can get some points back for it.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good point, Phil. Those we didn't talk about that. The risk adjusted medication adherence measures, right? And I know you've been digging into that and analyzing that. I've seen your spreadsheets,
Yes.
kind of looking at what are you seeing as far as national impacts there? Which measures do SNP plans tend to do a little better with or worse than for those
Oh,
adherence?
I mean, well, I know we're supposed to meet later this week too to
Right?
talk about what we both have found on that. So, yeah, I mean, the 2026 display data came out. That is our first look into those risk-adjusted medication adherence
Mm-hmm.
measures. And yeah, we took some time digging into those measures. It is interesting if you start breaking it down from just a STARS perspective, right? If you look at you take medication adherence for cholesterol, for example, you pull in the regular adherence measure, then you pull in the risk adjusted display measure, see what that performance looked like across health plans. It's an interesting story. It's not really one I'm ready to get into yet, especially because I need to hear Jessica's thoughts before we start, running around with the cowbell,
Right?
potentially
Right?
scaring people. But the just looking at the display data measure to the regular measures, I don't think it's what people are expecting, or
Yeah.
were thinking would happen. Um, there are some decreases, but there's also some surprising increases when you look at it broken out by the star rating. So if you take, medication adherence for cholesterol, you look at the 5-star performing plans, 4-star, 3-star, 2-star, 1-star for that measure, and you look at what their display measure is doing, just the rate,
Hmm.
it's not that far off. And that's going to be interesting to dive into, and try and figure out what kind of data that display data is telling us. But it's a good point, and we were talking about the adherence measures actually, Latanya. What do you guys think some barriers are for CleverCare when you look at your A1C or your GSD measure and you look at your blood pressure measure? When you look at your 5-star performance for those two HEDIS measures, and then you look at your slightly lower performance for the adherence measures, how do you correlate the two? What do you see as the biggest barrier with kind of matching those performances?
Yeah, great question. And I am all ears as you guys dive deeper into the updates around Part D and the trend, the cut points on those. But when we look at GSD and CBP compared to adherence rates, first thing is looking at if it's a clinical gap versus a data gap, right? And oftentimes for our members, when we look at the GSD and BP, we have a high compliance rate, right? Our members are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot more healthier members when it comes to those controlled measures. And so, because they're on the healthier side, right, we often see that those members are looking into alternatives versus the standard medications, right? So, they may look into diet changes, they may look into exercise, other things where because my A1C is controlled, right, I may not necessarily need to take this medication, right? So they have an excess of pills on hand. So they're not needing to refill as frequently, right? Because for adherence, they're looking at the refill status, the PDC rate, right? So our members may say, hey, well, I take my pill every other day. I'm not taking it every day. So now that my refill is due, I don't need to refill it because I have, still have pills on hand. So that's pretty much been our the nuances or the challenges we're running into is ensuring that if members are not taking their medications as prescribed, they're having these conversations with their provider, they're looking into alternatives, they're talking with their providers as well. So sometimes when we look at those rates, because they're in the managed bucket, they may not necessarily take in their medications as prescribed, so they're not refilling as we would typically expect.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah, that you're the first I've heard walk through it that way. You're taking too good care of your members, right? Just
Mhm.
let them slide a little. So they take their no. But that is interesting, and I think that would be interesting feedback to CMS as
Yeah,
well.
definitely. And one measure that aside from hypertension and diabetes, that's typically what we see with cholesterol. That's one of the key measures we
Sure.
often find also from a provider perspective. They're like, I'm not prescribing this. Sometimes it's the provider that's not willing to order or prescribed, or, when it comes to SPC, members that we're saying,
Hmm.
hey, this member should be on a statin. Provider feels totally opposite. Well, no, she does not need to be on a statin because XYZ, right? So that's where we also, with Clever, we assist with being the voice of the provider. We know that when measures roll out, there's that comment period, right? So providing this feedback
Right.
over to CMS when they're proposing new measures. Oftentimes we may not have our providers responding and commenting, but as you get feedback from our providers, as we get feedback from our providers, taking that and also sharing it and commenting back on some of these measures, because that does then be the challenge, because ultimately the provider is responsible for care, and I don't agree with what you're recommending. So we have to take that feedback into consideration and get that back up to the regulators.
That's right. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I love that whole train of thought. Have you guys started looking into your acumen reports? Have you had a habit of doing that and looking at how you perform in the different segments of those risk adjusted measures, like where your opportunities areas are, how you perform overall compared to the nation for these new risk adjusted measures?
Yeah, definitely. We have our pharmacy director that leads those initiatives, and we are working on looking at acumen, reviewing acumen. What are the opportunities? Also looking
Hmm.
at the claims, based on our pharmacy claims, what are the trends we're seeing there? So she's taking lead on that. Definitely, we're not leaving any stone unturned.
Good. I know what I'm hearing anecdotally aligned with a little bit of what I'm seeing in those acumen reports and echoed by what I'm seeing in CMS's 2027 CAI PDF that they just released. I'm seeing that surprisingly, I think a lot of us thought these risk adjusted measures are going to benefit all the heavy SNP plans and they're going to hurt all the non-SNP plans. And it's really kind of a mixed bag. I mean, we're like Phil said, we still have analysis to complete. We're not making any final statements, but really seeing a lot of these heavy SNP plans outperform a little bit their counterparts with the diabetes adherence measures, and kind of the opposite a little more for cholesterol and hypertension meds. So I thought that was really interesting, which led to another thought. I was kind of interested to see how that might play out with cut points, right? So the majority of contracts are not SNP contracts. So as you have the SNP contracts outperform and the non-SNP contracts, underperform a little bit in those measures, is the cut point movement that results from that going to negate any benefit a SNP plan might get from performing better in a measure like diabetes adherence? Is it going to be kind of a wash, or are they still going to get a little relief, I wonder, from this risk adjustment?
Right. That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are all just wild thoughts.
Yeah.
There's no, don't anyone go back and build your work plan based
We
on that
definitely
comment.
were not ready to talk about
We're not.
the advanced notice CMS cut point, propose little nugget that they put in there about getting away from clustering methodology. I was
Right?
Jessica started talking about cut points, and I was like, man, we're not quite ready to talk about how that's gonna look.
I know. I feel like they just throw this stuff in there just to stress us out, right? Like in case the blowing up of a quarter of the star ratings by removal of operations didn't stress you out enough.
Right.
we might screw with the cut point methodology too,
Right.
just for fun.
Right.
But we're not going to tell you any details about how we're going to do that.
Right. It's to keep us on our toes.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think I think we're getting quick. It always goes so quick. I feel like I'm talking with folks for 5 minutes, especially when we bring on folks like you, Latanya, with so much great info to share. But as we close out in the last few minutes, anything you'd like to share? Anything you want to bring forward?
I believe just pretty much the heart of what we've been sharing is that, and the way, we approach it here at CleverCare, and I would recommend other plans to do it as well, is as cut points change, as HEDIS, CMS's guidelines change, just moving with the member first and keeping the member first and your provider as your partner in how we're delivering care. When we take things when we take that approach, pretty much your stars are going to follow, right? I know most of the strategy and initiatives around stars. What do you do differently? How are we going to improve? It's putting that member first, understanding those nuances culturally, linguistic, putting the members first, and understanding who you serve and how you serve them, and adapting your strategies from there. Your star rates will follow, and that's pretty much it's been our focus and my focus in this space.
I love it. I have
That's
nothing better
awesome.
to close our episode with than that. Thank you so much,
I
Latanya, for
know.
You're
joining us today.
welcome. You're welcome, and
Yeah,
thank you guys for
I love it.
having me.
Love it. We wish you continued success too. We're excited to see your 27 scores. And yeah, just keep up the awesome work.
That's right.
Thank you guys.
Yep. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Bye.
joining us.